Morning.
Good
Welcome to
morning.
Inside the Huddle.
Welcome, everybody. Yeah, happy Monday. Happy day after Halloween.
Anybody have a candy hangover?
I have to admit I had a few that I didn't deserve or needed.
Me too. We keep going back in the kitchen and my wife would find another wrapper. What are you doing? You're eating all the kids' candy.
Yeah. And we've got some leftovers from my mother-in-law's place last night. I don't know what we're going to do with them. I feel like I bring them to the office and give them away.
Yeah, you have a responsibility to eat those, Steve. That's
No.
good consumerism right there.
You know, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm going to ask you to introduce our topic and get us started.
Well, I thought that, my Coach's Corner on Friday, I got some really positive feedback on the subject matter. And after you and I spoke on Friday as well, and the story you shared with me about your, was it half triathlon or half marathon or whatever the heck it was?
The half Ironman?
Half Ironman. Thought that story was incredibly inspirational in a lot of different ways. And I think all of us have, it's fair to say, we have an inner voice that we listen to. It's either, sometimes it's positive. A lot of times it's negative. In fact, I think my inner voice is more negative than positive. And I think we all need people in our lives to help us see what we're capable of being. So I think this concept of coaching is really important. It's important in sports, but in business, it's a buzzword. It's not something that's really taking place much. It's just someone that's normally listening to a problem, trying to offer a solution, and off you go. And a new day starts. But I thought it'd be really inspirational for you to kind of share that story, the Lampshade story, and then dive into a deeper conversation about the questions we have that we ask ourselves, the voice that we listen to, a conversation surrounded around limiting beliefs and unlimiting beliefs, and really talk about how important it is. And I look, how many people are on it? We have 16 people today, and I'm sure more will be on in a minute, but I hope everyone pays particularly close attention to Sean's story, because this might be one of the most powerful Inside the Huddles we've done in a while, I think. I mean, it really is, because it gets to a place that we all need to confront, which is, what stories do we tell ourselves? How do we see ourselves? Who's coaching us around some of these mental blocks?
Who's talking to us in our head?
Who's talking to us? What voice are you listening to? Yeah, so
the story I shared with Steve came from a while back. I did a lot of triathlons, and I was never designed to be a triathlete. I mean, I was a football player, shot putter, but I really got into it. So I just completed what's called a half Ironman, which is pretty long distance, and it went really well. It was my record. It went especially well for me, and I broke in 6 hours, which is pretty damn good for anybody. So, by all accounts, this is something I was really proud of and deserve to be really proud of. About 2 days later, I get an email from the company that goes to those races, and they take pictures of you swimming, biking. You've seen, or you go do if you do a race, they take pictures of you. They send me these pictures, and I look at them, and I started thinking to myself, oh my God, look at you. Look how fat you are. Look at you in that wetsuit. Look at you on that bike. What are you doing out there with all those healthy people? It occurred to me that if they could have somehow sent me the pictures of me doing the race before the race started, I'd have never done the race. Too embarrassed. You don't belong out there. And I mean, it sounds kind of crazy, but if you think about it, how often in life do we actually receive the pictures before we ever do the event? Usually the pictures come from that voice inside our head, where you start asking yourself or saying to yourself, oh, you're too inexperienced, or you're too young, or you're too old, or you don't know enough yet, you're not confident enough, you're too sensitive, or in my case, you're too fat. It's like we see ourselves being laughed at, maybe, or being found out. We start picturing ourselves as not having what it takes or not deserving it enough. of just plain not being enough. And I wonder how many times our fears prevented us from picking up the phone, or knocking on the door, or asking for the sale or a raise or a date. So I thought about this for a while, and I realized that the people who actually know me, the people who like me, certainly the people who love me, they don't see that. They don't see me as fat.
No.
They see the light that's inside of me. And there's a certain warmth, right? A certain confidence that comes from being seen for our light, not our perception of ourselves. And we can carry that everywhere. You can recognize that light in yourself, and you can carry it to strangers. So I began to think about all the times that I didn't go somewhere, I didn't meet someone new. I thought about all the opportunities in my life that I had missed because of my fears. And I came to the conclusion that I'd been so worried about the lampshade, I turned off the light. That we cannot do. That we have to overcome.
I tell you, Sean, when you shared that story with me, the part that stood out was the most powerful part is the acknowledgement that people that love you and know you, they don't see you that way. And I say to hell with everybody else, right? I mean, seriously, if someone's going to come from a position of judgment instead of curiosity about people, about things, our world's full of that. It's full of judgment, We don't look the same. We're not the same body type. We don't have the same skin color. We don't believe in the same religion. So we just sit around all day and we judge. Everybody does it, But the truth of that message that stood out to me is that people that love you and know you, they don't see you that way. And, I have a similar story that just briefly, not very long, but, my father's an engineer. I'm the oldest of three boys. So, I have a curse, and I think any eldest knows that you go through your life always seeming that you have to prove, because when you're the firstborn, you get all the attention. Then you get to live the rest of your life watching all your siblings take that away from you, and you feel like you're in this constant state of competition with, in this case, your brothers, to get attention from your parents. And so you always feel like you're striving and never arriving in this frustration. And then for me, it built even worse because my father being an engineer and both of my brothers being exceptionally brilliant at math. In fact, my youngest brother, Danny, when he was a freshman in high school, he was in advanced math, taking advanced calculus. And here I am. I can't get by basic math. I'm having a hard time memorizing my times tables. And I remember coming home one night after getting another D on my report card in math. And I said to my dad, I don't understand how this is so easy for you and for Mom and for Matt and Danny. I feel like I'm the dumbest person in the classroom. And my father said something to me that I'll never forget and always remember. He said, son, math may not be your specialty, but you have other gifts. You have other gifts. And the fact is about this math issue, it may not come as naturally to you as it comes to your brother, as it comes to Matt or Danny or myself, but it's in there. And you can get by if you just work a little bit harder. You have to work harder to get by. And you just got to get by so you can get past this class. And then what you are, the gifts that you have are very different than mine, very different than your brother's. Had my dad not had that conversation with me, I'd have been pulling the lampshade, turning off the light, because I was stuck, and it's tough to look up and see people advancing where you feel that, hey, I'm as good a human being as they are. I work hard, but I'm not advancing at the same level, So I just thought that was incredibly powerful, your story. And it made me think of that story with my dad and how grateful I was to have another voice.
Right.
Another voice that said, no. You just have to work harder, but you have other gifts. And I guess what I wanted to talk about today after you shared that with me is to dig a little deeper in how we go about our lives, identifying how we get to that voice. How do we find and identify those people that can lift us up and
that's the point.
Right. And unravel or unfold our unlimiting beliefs about ourselves.
Because, you said in the beginning the people who know us, who care about us, they see the light. They're not looking at the lampshade. And who cares about the people who are looking at the lampshade? But the tough part about this is a lot of the time, that's what we're looking at. We're being superficial and we're only seeing the doubts. And you need to have people in your life who can come along and ask the right questions,
Right.
to give you a new perception, a new framework, to show you maybe that's not your thing. You have other gifts. Simple thing to say, very powerful impact on the whole framework you have of your life. So where do we find that? Who do you have in your life that we talk to agents all the time about? You need to ask lots of questions of your clients. You need to always be curious. But who's asking you questions? Who's helping you change that voice and change the perception you have in your own life? Get rid of the limiting beliefs, right?
Yeah. Well, it's so important because when I was a manager in a previous life, I'm going back 15 years ago, and I shared this story. I had a gentleman who I'll just go by his first name, and this because for the sake of someone might know him, right? His name is Charles. And Charles was an age, if you've played sports, Sean, like you and I have, we both play football, you'll see people come out for tryouts, and it's pretty quickly, like you'll stand back and say, now again, I just said a moment ago, stay out of judgment into curiosity, but coaches have to evaluate, like, can this guy or can this gal play? Can they, is there a position we can put them other than mascot, right? Technically to run the team. And is there any difference in our business? I mean, do we see people get a license who come from a different walk of life? They come in, they see that real estate is this unlimited opportunity. They see people succeeding, and they want to give it a go. And there are people, if we're being honest, you and I here or any other manager on the call, that we come across it, man, this isn't their deal. Mm-hmm. This is just not their deal. And it's not that I ever wanted to be a dream buster. It's just that I had a guy that could not, it just wasn't the right deal. And I knew it. And I let him suffer for a year of paying dues, a year of paying MLS fees, without really intervening until about a year when I had to renew his business plan. I started asking some questions. Charles, this has been a rough year for you. Yeah, it has. Real shy guy. I said, if you could do anything in the world, like if the world were your oyster, I mean, like you could literally do anything in the world, what would you do? I love animals. He went on to tell me about his love for animals, how he grew up on the East Coast, and he had this thing for manatees. Like his dream, now get this, there's a guy working in Boulder, Colorado, whose dream was to help save manatees, because I didn't know much about this growing up in Detroit, but manatees are injured quite often by boats because they hover so close to the surface and people are buzzing by and they hurt them. And he wanted to find a sanctuary. He wanted to find a plot of land where he could rehabilitate these animals and do a job on educating the public to be careful in these waters, blah, blah, blah. Why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you doing that? If you were to be doing that, how would that make you feel? What would you do with that? So we went into this. Long story short, Charles resigned from real estate, moved. I didn't know this. He just resigned to quit, and I just thought he was going to go back to he was an accountant, by the way, so everyone knows he was an accountant. So long story short, I come back now. Fast forward, I'm just going to cut to it. Fast forward about 7 or 8 years later, my front desk receptionist said, "Steve, you have a guest in the lobby that would like to meet with you. Who is it?" And she told me this gentleman's name, and I didn't recognize it. Like I knew, like, that name should ring a bell to me. It sounds familiar. And in walks Charles. And in a long story short, he says, "Steve, I'm just here to tell you thank you. That conversation you had with me changed my life." And after I got done crying for about 20 minutes with this guy, he goes on to tell me that he became the general manager. Ultimately, I'm skipping some steps here because he went back, worked for a company called Marine World, entry level, taking care of animals, feeding them, doing whatever, marine animal, to the point where he became the general manager of SeaWorld in Tampa, Florida. Because of that conversation, that someone asking the right questions to help the person's light bulb go off and say, yeah, that's what I need to do. So when you shared your story, and what I wanted to get to today is, I just really believe that having other people in our lives, asking the right questions, that if we can find a way to open ourselves up, to be humbled and the humility to share, because it's not easy for a lot of folks to share, right, Sean? It's tough to share what you're afraid of, those fears.
Got to have a lot of trust.
Got a lot of trust. And the fact is, when I sit down with anybody, I usually had those same fears. And I had those same frustrations in my life. And together, you're going to find a match where that person can role model. There's a way through that. They can ask the right questions and keep you on track for your personal self-actualization. We're meant to be what we're supposed to be, which is what is inside of you has to come out. And having someone ask those questions is so important. Who asked you the questions, that made you believe it was even possible, right? I mean, you have those people in your life. Maybe we should talk about a few of those beyond just the inspiration to run the triathlon and have that moment. Because
that's the question here, right? You got Steve. What you're talking about makes sense to me. How do I get there? Some of us are lucky, right? I had some coaches that really made a difference. I have a very personal guide who I seek conversation with, I'll say, but really it's wisdom. But it's one thing to know, okay, that makes sense to me. It's another thing, how do we find them? Where do you look? And a lot of time it's not like closest friend or someone in our family, because there's so much history there already. It has to be someone who's knows you well enough to ask you questions, but is distant enough that they're not benefiting from it. One of the most powerful things that my dad ever told me when I was in high school, I was being recruited, right, from all these colleges for all this sports stuff. And he said, here's the one thing you have to all these people are going to tell you all these things. They're going to offer you all these things. Your mother and I are the only ones who have no vested interest except you. You could always come back here because our only interest is you, because you're our son. All the rest of them have something they want to gain, and sometimes you won't be able to see it. So it's got to be that level of intimate distance. Talking about oxymoron, but it's an intimate distance. So how do you find that person?
Maybe I think if you start with your own personal worksheet that says, in the next 12 months, this is what I want for myself. This is why I value this thing. So you say, this is what I want. This is why I value this. This is what having this would do for me. This is how I see myself right now and where I stand. And it's just write that out. And then on a separate sheet of paper, what are my limiting beliefs for that goal? And what are my unlimiting beliefs for that goal? And maybe the first place to start after you do that exercise would be with us as your sales manager. Because I agree that it's good to find that distance where someone's not trying to manipulate you to get what they want.
Right.
But I also believe that if you find someone where you mutually benefit together from the success that each of you share in that relationship, that might be the highest form of a relationship, right? Because you're both invested, you both mutually benefit. Not one, you mutually benefit together. You move forward together. That's why I think, Vince Lombardi, I tell you, I football talk, but on Saturday morning, I watched, there was the Inside the Life of, some special came on YouTube. It was about Vince Lombardi. And I didn't realize, I always saw him as this dictator person. He was a funny, caring, loving, he loved his players. He was tough on them, but he loved them in an unusual way, more than you would have ever expected when you realized the kind of person he was. And I think that's why when you find that coach, and you find that relationship, and there's love and care, concern, that's where the magic happens. And you focus it on your goals. Now, it's got to be about what you want, not about what the coach wants. This is what I'm trying to achieve. And then the coach says, okay, well, this will be the vehicle. We're going to use real estate to fund that. And I'm in real estate, and I'm driving production. You're trying to drive your production. Let me ask you some questions. So I think it can start there. Where else can they go besides that? I mean, that's the low-hanging fruit on my end, but where else do you think they could go?
Well, I agree with the clarifying questions, which is where you're going. And, they say a smart man learns from experience. A wise man learns from other people's experiences. sometimes, like I had a point in my life where I had to hit bottom. Things had gone very, very south. There was a huge blessing that came out of that because I was able to sit and say, well, I have nothing. Therefore, I have nothing to lose. There's an amazing freedom in that. Now, you don't have to go through that to get to that question. Or you can ask yourself, if I knew I could not fail, if I knew I would exceed no matter what would I be doing right now? You might surprise yourself if you just free flow and let that come out. And it may not be what you're doing. Doesn't mean you have to change immediately or ever.
No.
But we have to know that I can't even describe what happens when you're living a life that you were actually meant to live. When you're doing what's joyful, it changes everything in your life. But you have to ask yourself those questions, and you have to let that voice simmer down and be quiet for a little while. When I was doing the triathlons, I had a coach. That was one of my coaches, my Ironman coach. He would say, you're going to meet your friend out there on that course because you're going to be out there 13, 14 hours. I'm like, who the hell's my friend? Your friend is that little voice that's going to start talking to you. Hey, that pain in your knee, maybe you should stop. That could get serious.
Yeah, right.
Hey, you've almost completed the whole thing. I mean, who cares about finishing? You've already proven your point. You're amazing. They just start talking in your ear, that voice that talks to us. And he said, you're not going to make the voice go away, just like none of us right now make that voice go away. But what you can do is make friends with it. You can say, hi, old friend, good to see you. I appreciate that you're protecting me. Right now, I'm just going to think freely. I'm not doing anything. You don't have to worry. Go back, sit down, relax, and let that voice clear a little bit.
When I had that,
what would I do?
When I had that voice show up, I still do this now, and you're going to love that. Maybe you will. I say, tell me something good. That conversation in my book, tell me something good. Right. I do a lot of teaching in my offices. It's the basics. I think there are 7 key fundamentals that if any real estate agent mastered them, their success would be inevitable. Mastering listings, working with buyers, prospecting, lead generation, marketing. I try to cover those 7 things. And I have a belief, Sean, that you can't coach someone if you don't teach them. And that's why I teach. I don't think you have permission to coach someone unless you're teaching. How do you coach someone if you're not teaching them? So that's, to me, it's such an important part. And if you're in an environment that you're not getting taught about certain things that are important, you find that environment, find that relationship. It could be internal. It could be with a mentor. It could be with another outside coach. I don't care where you go, but you can't be coached if you're not being taught. Do you agree with that, or does that make sense?
It makes sense. I guess I come at it a little differently, so it's hard for me to relate to that, but I agree with it.
Yeah.
I look at everything as mindset. When I'm coaching, when I'm talking to someone, it's always about reframing. Because I think we all know what we need to know already. You have the answers inside you. We've got to reframe the question. We've got to reframe the perception we have. To let, Seth Godin said this, and it blew me away. He said, we're always worried about being successful. Mm-hmm. The odds are 1 billion to 1 of you ever existed. You're here. You're already the most successful thing that's ever going to be. What do you want to do with it? Yeah. Stop worrying about success and worry about what am I going to do with it? I have this amazing gift. How do I change the framework and live the gift? Who do I talk to? Who can ask me the questions that will help me change that framework? I wish I had a simple answer on how to find that person. I don't. But acknowledging that that's an important thing in life will open up a lot of doors. Just knowing, hey, I need to pay attention. I need to find this in my life. And you could start with your sales managers. I mean, this is what all of us do to some degree all the time.
Right.
It's help agents grow their business, which usually means get out of their own way.
Yeah, where it's just opening yourself up to be coached. Again, not everyone wants that. So we understand that, and but I think to achieve your highest and best self, you need another voice. I mean, who's challenging you on your plan? Who's challenging you on your strategy? Who's challenging you or helping you overcome an outcome?
Your beliefs.
So that didn't work for you, Sean. Help me understand. Is this something you want to get better at? Are you okay with that result? And
the answer normally will be, well, I'd like to, but I can't. Because
well, if I can do one thing with you or for you that would help you overcome that, what would that be? So you just got to get right to the focus, to the now. Like, what can I do for you now that would help you move forward? This is a conversation I have with agents when I'm coaching them. It's 15 minutes. What was your goal? How did you do based on your result? Do you want to leverage that further? Do you want to change that outcome? You're driving it. Like, I can't make you want it more than I want it for you, right? But if you do,
what I want to get across to them, though, and I think you're the same way, is when they tell me why, is that actually true? Is it true that I'm too old, too young, too tech deficient, too inexperienced, too whatever the thing is, whatever the lampshade is that actually true? Where did that belief come from? Because it is a belief. That's all it is. But someone has to ask you that. All right, I feel like we're repeating ourselves. I'd love to see if anybody on the call has experience with something like this or wants to share a similar story or has thoughts on how to get someone into your life who can ask you the right questions. We have the most loyal audience. They just look to listen.
They're shy.
Okay.
No takers.
Maybe they want to wait till the recording's over. On the importance of questions, Brian put up a great quote from Lombardi, one of my favorites, about, perfection is not attainable, but in chasing perfection, we will catch excellence.
Right.
On questions, one of my favorite quotes, and I'm not even sure he ever said it, but it's attributed to Einstein, where he said, if you gave me 60 minutes to solve a life or death problem, I'd spend the first 50 minutes developing the question.
Right.
Ask the right question and the answer becomes obvious.
Well, all I can say to put a knot on this or a bow on it is that I don't think I'd be the person I am or the man I am in terms of the kind of father I hope to be or husband I hope to be or am, if it wasn't for someone that was in my life with a higher minded focus for me, asking me questions or teaching me stories or using stories to teach me lessons or sharing life experience. All of these things are role modeled from us, from outside of us. We have an inner voice. It gives us positive reinforcement at times. I think it's proven that most of the time it will give us negative reinforcement because that's how we're wired to survive. Don't do that.
Avoid that.
That's the human species, is to be more concerned with fear than opportunity. And so as a result, that voice is louder. That voice takes precedent. But it's the voice that puts a ceiling on top of you. And for some, it's a glass ceiling. For some, it's a concrete ceiling. If we don't have,
it's all an illusion.
It's all an illusion. It's all an illusion. I mean, it's all we are is thought. Whatever goes on in our mind at any given moment. That the power behind someone asking you questions is they're challenging you. How bad do you want it? Like that. What was it? That professor from on the East Coast that wrote the book. What was it? The Secret.
Mm-hmm.
The Secret. And one of the parts he would talk about when he met this one coach, one of his professors, is that walls were built to keep people who didn't want it bad enough out. When you hit a wall, right, that wall is there to challenge you, to see how bad do you want it. We all run against those walls. If we had the coach saying, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, the wall becomes like an obstacle that can be conquered versus one that you're in a circle thought in your mind saying, I can't do that. I can't do that. So anyway, I just thought I want to thank you for sharing that story and being open about how you felt when you saw that, because I know that I've had in my own way that very same experience where I've looked at myself and just the first thing that came to mind was a negative thought, and how long that's how that's limited.
How often? Right. How often have I done this without thinking about it? I would like to leave you guys with a question, and then we'll turn the recording off and stick around for any questions you have. But I want to tell you something, and then I want you to think about your first reaction. Is it one of elation or fear? Here's the thing I'm going to tell you. You're the only you that's ever existed in the history of the world or ever will. That is an amazing, unique gift. It is you. You need to celebrate.